So hi friends, I'm back with my series on DPDP Act 2023. Please note this series is only for educational purpose and should not be literally taken as a legal advice. So friends, what did DPDP Act 2023 try to achieve? There was no act earlier, especially on the digital data protection. But this introduction of DPDP Act marked a very important moment in India's journey to establish a framework for safeguarding of an individual's digital personal data. So it laid down a path for protecting an individual's personal data which is in digital form. It aimed to define the boundaries of data privacy, what is the scope of data protection, what is the objective of data privacy, and it also reshaped the manner in which our data is handled in this digitization world. Just to give you an overview about this DPDP Act, it has 9 chapters and 44 sections. Various provisions of this act will come into force only as per the notification by the government. They might come on different dates. Also, different sections might come into effect on different dates. And as mentioned earlier, India did not have any specific law for my digital data protection. There was earlier an IT Act with SPDI rules 2011, which regulated in somewhat manner my personal data. So friends, as mentioned in my previous slide, this act has 9 chapters. The first chapter being preliminary, it will cover 3 sections: title, definition, application of the act. Friends, we will cover in detail what this section means with examples in my upcoming lectures. The second chapter talks about obligations of data fiduciary, grounds for processing, notice, consent, legitimate uses, general obligation of fiduciary, personal data of children, additional obligations of significant data fiduciary. These sections form part of the second chapter. Then comes the third chapter, rights and duties of data principle, access to personal data, what is my right of correction and erasure, what is grievance redressal right, nomination right, duties of data principle. The fourth chapter is on special provisions, which will cover processing of personal data and exemption. The fifth chapter refers to the formation of the Data Protection Board, which will cover establishment of the board, composition, its salary, disqualification, resignation, proceedings of board, officers and employees of board, members and officers to be public servants, powers of the chairperson. The sixth chapter will cover power, functions and procedures of the board. Seventh will cover appeals and disputes. Eighth will cover penalties and adjudication. And the ninth chapter is about some miscellaneous topics. So friends, there are two objectives which are mentioned in the DPDP Act. The first objective, if I read, an act to provide for the processing of the digital personal data in a manner that recognizes the right of individuals to protect their personal data. If I give an example here, now a patient visits a hospital and provides his medical history, his name of course, contact information and some insurance details. So this is personal data which he has provided to the hospital. Now the hospital has to ensure that this personal data should be kept confidential. He should put adequate controls so that there is no data leakage and data does not fall into the wrong hands. What is objective 2? An act to provide for processing of digital personal data in a manner that recognizes the need to process such personal data for lawful purposes and for matters connected therewith or incident thereto. So continuing with the same example, now what will the hospital do? It has to use the data only for lawful purpose. That means only for maybe treatment, right? For diagnosis, etc. So this is the lawful use of the personal data. Now I give you another example covering both the objectives. Say a person opens a bank account, right? He gives his details, maybe a PAN card number or any other identification proof, address. All this is personal data which he has shared with the bank for opening a bank account. Now, the bank has to implement adequate data protection measures to secure this information and prevent it from identity theft or from leakage. Now, what are the lawful purposes for which this data will be used by the bank? So, it will of course process the bank statements for the customer, right? Then it might disclose certain things to the regulatory authorities. So, they are all lawful purposes. So friends, this slide is very important because the Act talks about the applicability, whether DPDP Act is applicable or not. So within India and outside India. Now within India, the Act will be applicable to the processing of the digital personal data within the territory of India where the personal data is collected in digital form. So, for example, now there is a social media platform based in India that collects personal information like say name or your email address, date of birth, etc. when you sign up and create a new ID. So this data is collected digitally. Of course, it is in India. So definitely DPDP Act will be applicable and the social media platform will have to comply with the provisions of DPDP Act. It will also apply to the processing of digital personal data within the territory of India where the personal data is collected offline and later it is digitized. So, to give you an example, say a retail store is there in India. Now, this retail store captures customer feedback forms, but it takes it in a paper format. Later, this retail store, it inputs all these records containing personal information like say name, email address, etc. and inputs all this information in the application. So friends, will it be applicable now DPDP Act? It will be applicable because though it was first collected offline, but it was later digitized. So the Act does not cover information which is in physical form and is collected offline. Now what about applicability of data of DPDP Act outside India? So it applies to processing of digital personal data outside India if it relates to offering of the goods or the services to individuals in India. Now here to give an example, say there's a person, Pooja, who's based outside India and this female, she wants to sell her goods, right, to the customers who are based in India. And so she offers through a platform the products. Now, there are some customers who will fill in the details, right, and order for the product. So, will it be applicable DPDP Act? Yes, definitely. Because the data, though it is processed outside India, but there was an offer made for the goods or the services to individuals in India. Now here, if you notice, this offer of goods or services need not be for money. It can be free also. So irrespective of whether it is free or money is charged for offering the goods or the services, DPDP Act will be applicable. So the Act also talks about cases where DPDP Act will not be applicable. So where it will not be applicable? It will not be applicable in case of personal data which is processed by an individual for personal or domestic purpose. Now suppose I have kept some information in Excel sheet, my PAN card, my Aadhaar card number example, and then I upload that information on the cloud, right? So this is not for anyone's commercial purpose, etc., or sharing it with anyone. I've just kept it for my personal purpose. So will DPDP Act be applicable to me? No, because the information is for any personal or for domestic purpose. Same way, the DPDP Act will not be applicable where the personal data that is made or caused to be made publicly available by data principal to whom such personal data relates. So, example, I give my personal details on a social media platform, right? My personal details like say my date of birth or my full name, etc. Will the DPDP Act be applicable to me or to the social media platform for protecting my personal data? No, because I have voluntarily made it public, right? Anyone can view it. Then it will also not be applicable in case of personal data made or caused to be publicly available by any person who is under an obligation under any law in India where it is obliged, that person is obliged to make such personal data publicly available. So, like many companies, they have to say disclose the director details on their website, etc. Or government agencies, public institutions, they have to disclose some information which is as required as per the law. So, to these corporates or to these government agencies or public institutions, will the DPDP Act be applicable? The answer is no. So, just a synopsis of the applicability of the DPDP Act here. Is my data a personal data which is being processed? Yes and no. So, if it is not my personal data, DPDP Act will not be applicable. Then, if my personal data is being processed, whether the processing is done in India, yes, or it is done outside India. So if processing is done in India, I will further question whether it is collected online. Yes, DPDP Act will be applicable. If it is collected offline but later made digital, whether DPDP Act will be applicable? Yes. But suppose if there is no digital personal data, then whether DPDP Act will be applicable? It will not be applicable. Now, if processing is outside India, yes. Whether there is an offer to of goods and services to individuals in India. So whether DPDP Act will be applicable? Yes, of course, it will be applicable. So friends, this is very important slide again. For the applicability of the Act, here I will question whether my data is a personal data or a non-personal data. So friends, what will happen if it is a non-personal data? DPDP Act will not be applicable. Then I have to further question, is my data personal? And if it is personal, whether it is in digital form. So, if it is not in digital form, then friends, whether DPDP Act will be applicable or no? No. So, if the information is in offline mode or it is in physical copies, then DPDP Act is not applicable. Now, I have personal data also. I have digital data also. Definitely, I have to question now whether it belongs to an individual or it belongs to a non-individual. So friends, if the digital personal data belongs to a non-individual, DPDP Act will not be applicable. Then, for an individual whose personal data is being collected, which is in digital form, of course, I have to question whether this individual has shared this information publicly or is being shared under any other law, or this information he is using for personal or domestic purpose. So whether DPDP Act will be applicable in both these cases, it will not be applicable, else it will be applicable. So friends, if you have really liked my series, do subscribe, do share, do download, hear it, give me suggestions for improvement. Thank you. See you again.